Don't move!
We are on a dangerous march right now. They go after professors, they go after students. They start arresting people on false pretenses to try to silence and chill speech.
She told me I was making people uncomfortable, and I told her, well, genocide is uncomfortable.
They ended up being handcuffed and then imprisoned for 16 days.
First mistake, they believe it's broken. So it's not broken, it's designed to do this. You need to break these systems down because they were designed to oppress us.
You're having Jews standing there. Everybody's screaming. We're talking about people who are dying, innocent people, and they get thrown out of the universities because they said a word. That charge that they're using is criminal.
It's disgusting, first of all, but it's really scary, man, to see people who are here legally, who have exercised their freedom to speak and to assemble, be kidnapped off the streets of America. To see that consistently, it's very scary.
But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
Our Constitution wasn't ratified until they agreed on the Bill of Rights.
Congress passes the most sweeping civil rights bill ever to be written into the law.
And the First Amendment to that Constitution was the right to assemble and to speak and to practice your religion, freedom of speech.
We are meeting here today to dedicate another shrine, a new shrine of freedom.
There's two ways to look at freedom of speech in the United States. One hand is, it actually is a wonderful innovation kind of in human affairs to have it written down in the very First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution that everyone, not just journalists, have freedom of speech, freedom of press.
The laws exist, but it doesn't apply to everyone equally. Whether you're a Palestinian now in 2025 or whether you're a black person or an indigenous person, as we see in the news.
If you are engaged in espionage and steal secrets and give them to a foreign government, certainly that is a crime under the Espionage Act. But telling the public what you believe they have a right to know is not a crime, and it is constitutionally protected. And that's a good example of the way that, despite the fact that that is constitutional protection enshrined in the First Amendment, it is not respected by prosecutors.
So we have changed laws, but we haven't changed hearts and minds.
So there's this history of suppression of free speech and people, the underdogs, fighting for free speech, for their freedom. And that goes all the way through the history of this country. And today, the cutting edge on which that attack is going on is against the movement for Palestinian freedom, against the movement against Israeli genocide, and trying to falsely equate anti-genocide with anti-Semitism. And that's, of course, a false equation.
So it's funny because these values, these American values, they're our values as Palestinians, as Muslims. You know, this treating everybody with dignity, with kindness, allowing everyone to have their right to speak their mind. These are all values that we grew up with and that we assumed were given to us in this country as a given. You know, these are our constitutional rights. And this is the first time that I've ever felt as an adult that it didn't apply to me. The laws just don't apply to me.
It's a paradox because on the one hand, we are not enslaved anymore physically. I would argue that we're enslaved psychologically and definitely economically. I would make that argument.
There is nothing controversial with standing up for liberation and freedom for any peoples, but especially Palestinians. If you truly believe in people's inalienable rights, if you truly believe in freedom and liberation, none of this is controversial.
There
if you truly believe the oppressed deserve to be free, none of this is controversial.
Well, free speech is very important. I don't know if you're referring to any place in particular.
The newest innovation in the crackdown of speech takes an immigration perspective.
The front line right now in this battle is on our college campuses, particularly around the issue of Palestine and people wanting to just get our government to stop helping Israel to bomb the Palestinians out of existence.
And so what the Trump administration is doing is it is saying, if you were critical of Israel, it's not critical of the United States, say whatever you want about the United States, but if you've been critical of Israel, we're going to look into your immigration status. Mahmoud Khalil became the kind of most famous example of this. Rumeysa Ozturk, maybe the second most famous. The difference between those two is that Rumeysa's here on a student visa. And our understanding is that the Trump administration thought Mahmoud Khalil was here on a student visa.
But we also see it in people who are teachers in this country, not just on the university level, but also in high schools and in elementary schools who have lost their jobs because they want to teach real history. And that means something like teaching about the Nakba in 1948 and what happened to over 700,000 Palestinians who were displaced from their homes. We see it in the way the government is going after not just students on the Palestine issue, but it started with students on the Palestine issue, and then it has become more broad. Then it's just a step away to go after all foreign students in the United States, and there's about 1 million of those.
What's the number up to now? How many visas have you revoked?
I don't know the latest count, but we probably have more to do.
Can you give us an estimate?
Probably in the thousands at this point.
They don't have fewer rights when they're here, but they can be kicked out, kind of at the whim of the administration, whereas a permanent resident cannot just be kicked out or jailed for speech. And what that made them do is kind of reverse engineer a justification for why what they were doing to people here on a visa.
They've tried to smear people as anti-Semitic for simply speaking the truth. They're using the people on the list to send a message to everybody else that if you speak up on behalf of justice for Palestine, this is what could happen to you. It's the hope that by intimidating and threatening and ruining people's careers if they can, that they will silence the anti-genocide movement.
And what this administration is doing is actually violating human rights and violating international law. And for them, for somebody to advocate for this, it seems to be a threat.
The young people who are full of fresh life, they haven't been tainted, they haven't been ruined by, jaded by life experience, so they're ready to talk out, they're ready to speak up. They're full of energy, and they say, I can't understand this. You taught me, they say to the parents, you taught me that when I see something wrong, I should speak up. You're sending me to university to speak up against evil.
They are weaponizing, actually, the idea of anti-Semitism. They are gaslighting the American people that universities are the hubs for anti-Semitism, while this is not the truth. They are distracting from the real issues of anti-Semitism that are actual and happening in different parts of this country.
Even unionizing, you get fired if you mention the word union. I think these institutions are losing their grip, and they're seeing that, and they're coming down harder.
So our free speech is being chipped away because people are supporting the Palestinian people, because they're speaking out against genocide. They're finding themselves in very difficult situations here in the United States, whether they're U.S. citizens or not.
The most pressing threat against free speech in this country, most immediately, is the Trump regime. Even before the Trump regime, the Democrats were attacking free speech around Palestine. But the Trump regime has escalated that to an unparalleled degree. What's happened is that the Democrats, when they were in office at the national level, and all the lower level politicians who have demonized the student protesters as being anti-Semitic, smeared them rather than supported them in standing up against genocide, have opened the door, have legitimized Trump's accusation that opposition to genocide is anti-Semitic. That somehow there's a Palestine exception to free speech, which of course there is not. It's really a bipartisan attack that's happened on free speech in this country, on First Amendment rights.
So we don't have free speech here in the United States. especially right now when people are so intimidated and do lose their jobs over telling the truth.
Sadly, we are seeing far too many warning signs that our free speech rights are being infringed upon, oppressed, repressed under this current regime that we have in the White House.
I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America.
Oftentimes, reporters and others are waiting for somebody to be the first person to say the obvious truth. Once that first person's gone through, then others fill in behind them.
I just think silence is deadly. It truly is just deadly, and we really cannot afford to stay silent.
I hate when there's not a fair fight, and if I can insert myself in situations, whether it's in terms of political justice, economic justice, social justice, racial justice, wherever there's an injustice, if I can leverage the person that I am, the experiences that I have, I will do that.
You now have the attention of the world. Use your voices and speak out.
My values are built by two things: prison and Palestine. I have personally, as a young child, I experienced prison. Judges see black and brown boys differently in the UK and the US, where someone might get a slap on the wrist historically if they were white. You know, I was incarcerated for that. And in Palestine, when you visit it, you can't unsee apartheid. You can't unsee oppression. It's a choice to actually look away. If you have a heart, there's an urge in you to act constantly about this. And these things define who I am as a human being, because for me, it's just pursuit of justice. You know, I would stand up and speak for anyone who's oppressed.
So I saw my government going to war all over the world for no reason, no benefit for the American people, oftentimes destroying the lives of people overseas. And I realized from an early age, in fact, from the days of the Vietnam War, that I didn't want to just be a background viewer of these. I wanted to be involved. I wanted to be a good citizen. I wanted to use my rights as a citizen to speak out, to organize, and try to change my government's policies, both domestic policies and international.
Congressman, we're sorry to interrupt you, but there's an urgent question about a genocide going on in Gaza.
How are the hostages doing?
And so protests are really one of the only ways we have to make our voices heard.
We are hurting by what it is doing to the people of Palestine today, what it did, especially what we are witnessing in Gaza, the horrific, the Nakba, this catastrophe, this genocide. Millions of people around the world are witnessing this. We have the obligation to speak up. That's what we're doing. We're speaking up.
Gathered across from the United Nations, and we have unfortunately come out here to mourn at a present destruction, a movement called Zionism, a movement of heretics, of evildoers who are trying to hijack the name Israel.
Everybody, no matter what their background, their family background, or their national background, or their religious background, has an obligation to stand up against genocide. I mean, that's just humanity 101. But those in whose name the genocide is being committed have a particular obligation and responsibility to stand up and say, not in our name.
Today, we have many more people are standing on the streets, tens and hundreds of thousands. Till now, we didn't even have that.
This is what democracy looks like. Killing children is his game. Free Palestine.
We will not bow.
Our two demands are full humanitarian aid to Gaza immediately under the UN authority. And the second is no more U.S. weapons to Israel so we can stop that genocide.
How my government makes me complicit with the mere political aid that they send.
as a U.S. veteran, I spent 29 years in the U.S. military. I retired as a colonel. And I feel I have the responsibility to try to hold my government accountable for its actions. And when my government is a part of a genocide of another people, then you have to speak up. Your responsibility is to speak up, not to be silent.
What we have seen on the college campuses is just outrageous. And we can bet that if we allow the government to continue doing that, that those tactics are going to come around to haunt every one of us, no matter what our status is in this country.
And it is beginning to happen here, and our rights are being eroded, and free speech is being taken away.
So we have to be vigilant and outspoken and demand that our government stop criminalizing human beings.
No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace!
Over the course of my life, I've spoken out against transnational corporations. I've stood up to the governor of New Jersey, who screamed at me to sit down and shut up at one point. But I never felt like there was a tremendous amount of pressure from our government. Maybe from, the university that I was working at, but, from the United States government and all the power that comes with that. Did I ever feel that my right to free speech was being threatened or coerced? No. Do I feel that way now? Absolutely. We are on a dangerous march right now. They go after professors. They go after students. They start, arresting people on false pretenses to try to silence and chill speech. And we are seeing all this happen under the Trump regime.
I was fired for speaking up about the Palestinian genocide. I got my award for my compassionate care. The incidents leading up to the award were not very reassuring. I was not in a good space and in a good place with my employer at the time. I had gone through several interviews with HR, interrogations really. I was called in to speak with the vice president of nursing. She told me I was making people uncomfortable. And I told her, well, genocide is uncomfortable. And she switched her demeanor up, told me I needed to stop posting. And my manager at the time, who was completely out of the loop, tells me, Hessan, just comply, sign the paper. You don't have to admit to any of it, but just do it so that you can keep your job. And she told me, just stick to posting about your cats and your dinners. So I refused to sign that piece of paper. So imagine every single day I'm going into my unit, I'm checking my emails to see if I'm still employed. How do you go from threatening to terminate me and me wondering if I have a job every single day that I'm there for nothing, and then suddenly you're presenting me with an award? So it just felt very disingenuous.
It pains me to see the women from my country going through unimaginable losses themselves during the current genocide in Gaza.
Everybody in administration was in that audience, the CEO who was sending pro-Israeli emails, and I wanted them to hear the word genocide because the ICJ had just declared it as such. And I was fully aware of what the consequences would be because every single day leading up to that day, I was prepared to lose my job regardless.
My father-in-law, blessed memory, by the way, who was in Auschwitz and was on the death march from Auschwitz, told me that he went demonstrating in front of the UN when I was probably a child. He said he was so afraid for his life because of the vicious attacks of the Zionists. He used to say to me, you think it's hard now, you should know what we went through at the beginning. They're relentlessly getting both attacked by Zionists while they're demonstrating. We witnessed this. We alone got attacked. Just a few weeks ago when people were throwing bricks, attacking us, there was no arrests immediately after these attacks. After a lot of pressure, maybe somebody got arrested. But we did witness is that people with the Zionists would come and push to the crowd and agitate and do whatever they could. And if somebody pushed back, then they would take that piece of a video where that guy pushed back, and they would use that and make a big issue of this and show that the ones who are supporting of Palestine, that they're wild, and there was 7 arrests, there was 8 arrests. What happened to that arrest?
Years ago, I used to be on channels like CNN, even Fox News. It's been years now that I have not been invited. In fact, I'm told that I'm blacklisted to even go on the liberal mainstream cable stations of MSNBC. And the same for PBS, the public broadcasting systems. We find it very hard to get our articles, our op-eds printed in the mainstream press, again, Used to be able to, can't do that anymore. I haven't had a piece in the Washington Post and the New York Times in years and years. The other is government censorship. We have been attacked by our own government in many different ways. The last time I traveled to Iran and came back to the United States, who was waiting for me but the FBI? And that's very intimidating. We have lawsuits against Code Pink that are frivolous lawsuits that have no basis. Some of them by individuals who want to curb our free speech, and some of them have been pushed by government officials as well. There are lots of different lawsuits that we have to contend with. Luckily, so far, we've been able to because there is no factual basis in these. But it does take time, it takes money, it takes hiring lawyers, it diverts a lot of our attention from the other work that we're doing, and that's precisely what it's meant to do. Intimidate us. I mean, all of these things, we were right, but we suffered a lot for speaking out against U.S. government policy.
The attack on free speech in this country could have no limit, and it is a very dangerous phenomenon. In my case, I was imprisoned, detained, and put in prison just for advocating for my people, for the Palestinian people, and for humanity. I ended up being handcuffed and then imprisoned for 16 days.
Armed masked individuals in plain clothes arrested him, forced him into a car, and refused to provide any information.
And it can have a much further effects if they can't silence somebody by putting them only in prison. What are they going to do to them?
The US will continue to clamp down on all freedom. We're going to crack down on people who are openly supporting effectively another civilization right now, and just asking for them not to be exterminated. That's where the US is at. We're going to crack down on you.
We've always understood that journalism carries with it risks, but to have this extreme disparity where it's not a paranoid fear to say, if your byline is on this story, you may lose your visa or your naturalization status or your permanent residency status may be called into question. It's not paranoia. It's simply a rational calculation at this point. And because we can do the stories without putting everybody's name on it, the work can still go forward. But yeah, it is a real kind of assault on one of the core tenets of journalism in the United States, which has always been you do the reporting, you get the scoop, you put your name on it, and that's how you would kind of advance your career. And that is cut off now. The biggest creeping problem beyond Trump's kind of criminalization through immigration is the weaponization of defamation lawsuits, because that's the silent killer. It's the stories that you just decide not to do because doing them could end you as a news organization. We work very hard to make sure that our stories are defensible against lawsuits, but the lawsuits are expensive. Lawsuits are aimed to destroy you. And we're facing one now, and it's costly in time and resources, even though the person that's suing isn't alleging that we even said anything wrong.
Our left-wing media institutions, colleges and universities, they're going loco. They've gone loco. Something's wrong with them.
American foreign policy on Israel, the Israeli occupation, extraction from the rest of the world, the disguise that they're giving people democracy when bombing them and taking their resources, has been consistent.
America hates war. America hopes for peace. Therefore, America actively engages in the search for peace.
Whether it was Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Obama, Biden, or Trump, the only difference is today is Trump's just honest about what America is. And that is actually a good thing. The rest of the world can see what America is and what it does, but also Americans who are sold this lie that we go abroad and give people democracy, that we save lives, that we protect people's rights, that we help the oppressed. It's not hidden from them either.
If you said, let's say 15 years ago, maybe not even that long, anything bad about Israel or Jewish people, you were finished as a politician, right? You were finished. You wouldn't do that, Congressman.
The Trump administration, and not just the Trump administration, but the Democratic administration under Biden and all the Democratic politicians, both locally and statewide, have jumped on that same bandwagon to demonize and smear the protests as being anti-Semitic, and have completely ignored the fact that not only is anti-Zionism not anti-Semitism in general, but that many young Jews were and are involved in those protests, including supporting those people who have been kidnapped and abducted by ICE.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free
Palestine! The CEO was sending emails about Ukraine before Palestine. For weeks, there were posters everywhere collecting donations for Ukraine. And I was like, you're gonna sit there and tell me I'm not allowed to mention my people, my identity, and what makes me able to give this care in a speech that was supposed to honor me, but yet there were posters circulating for Ukraine, collecting donations, showing empathy and compassion for Ukraine. No one batted an eye, and they looked shocked. What? That happened? We didn't know. It wasn't supposed to. It really, like, the hypocrisy was just so jarring.
We've witnessed 77 years of an occupation, a slow river of blood of the Palestinian people and the Jewish people who have suffered along with the Palestinian people. Our cries have been ignored. We went to the UN, as I say, since I was a child, we would go to the UN and demonstrate. The media totally blacked this out. I could remember how the media, we went some mass demonstrations, we had tens of thousands of Jews, and they would just report on the news that there is a traffic jam. They won't even say why. Yet if the Zionists make any type of small gathering, it's blown up and written about and everything. This is a fact. I'm living this for tens and tens of years. But basically we demonstrate, and it never gets properly written. Even when the newspapers or the media decides to cover it, it's usually in a manner of ridicule, that it's the ultra-religious, the fanatic religious. What do you mean fanatic religious? Pro-Zionist, they are the mainstream. They became the distinguished spokespeople. But that's the way it is, and they're constantly ridiculing. It's written slanted. We found it all the time. We even are reluctant to give interviews with a lot of the Western media because of their way that they degrade. Unfortunately, like I say, we're yelling, we're crying, we're pleading, but the governments are digging in their heels into this, that it's anti-Semitic to speak up against Zionism. It's mind-boggling, and it doesn't make sense. The media, they should be asking, why is the very religious opposed to the state of Israel? And they should be realizing that they're being duped, they're being conned. And if it didn't till now, they didn't realize till now, when you're witnessing the genocide in Gaza now, you have to step back and say, it can't be that this is godliness. It can't be right.
Could you imagine what that polling would be like if the BBC, CNN, Sky News, whatever other outlet, MSNBC, simply just showed the images of Gaza that the Israeli occupation themselves post on their Instagram and TikTok and say they did it? They don't care. Celebrate it, in fact. Could you imagine what that would be like and what that would cause in the West? That our governments support that. So the only reason they continue this charade of giving Israel a side is they're worried that if that thing turns up to 90%, that people will be throwing them out of office, quite literally. If you remember the very first hospital they bombed, everybody and the West was like waiting for the Israeli statement to report it. And they didn't even do any independent verification, anything. Social media is the only reason the world has mobilized for the Palestinian people.
But the media has been really total in the camp, as if they've been sent out by the Israeli IDF.
NBC, your hands are red! NBC, your hands are red!
And they were even caught in the New York Times that there were writers of the newspapers were from the IDF, and they had to sort of back out of even of October 7th, about the report of what happened October 7th, full of lies, full of omissions and full of lies. So basically, you have the media with a slanted report of what's happening.
The New York Times, to its credit, figured out a business strategy, creating an entire kind of home for a lot of its subscribers, where they just feel comfortable hanging out all day long and then willing to pay for that. They almost lead with that stuff, and then the journalism is kind of extra. In the past, If they had done reporting as awful as they've done on this genocide, their opponents, their adversaries, their competitors, not because they ideologically disagree with the New York Times, but simply out of commercial self-interest, would have challenged the Times. Now there's nobody to hold them to account except the independent press, which can leave a mark, can draw their attention, but doesn't do it in the way that other mainstream, competitors might do it.
They take the most expensive PR firms, public relations firms. They have, unabatingly, they teach, they constantly speak about that. They're representatives of Judaism, of God, the Torah. So people around the world bought into the Zionist narrative that Jewish people simply trying to have a homeland, and everybody who's opposing them is anti-Semitic. That's what they were trying to create, this narrative, and the world bought into that. But the world leaders were more knowledgeable. The layman on the street didn't know better. But the leaders knew because they get the true information.
No single political spat or public disagreement can sever our historic alliance with Israel.
So we are witnessing that the people are maliciously, knowledgeably, they're supporting the bombing. Why?
Well, first it's important to understand what we're up against. There is the military-industrial complex that makes its money by continuing to send so many weapons to Israel. There is the pro-Israel lobby, both the Jewish lobby like AIPAC and the Christian lobby, and they are all constantly pushing for U.S. support to Israel.
America's security partnership with Israel is stronger than ever.
We will meet our military assistance commitments to Israel and provide additional funding in times of crisis when she needs us. We will be there. We are there and we will be there for Israel.
Unfortunately, it's the handful of people in power who still wield that and are still destroying our world.
And we shouldn't and we cannot just blame Trump and the Republicans. And so it's a systemic problem where the establishment has been completely co-opted, Republican and Democrats, by big money, by special interests, and by the AIPAC lobby in particular. This is all AIPAC.
And let me assure you right here and right now, President Donald Trump's commitment to Israel is sacrosanct. Congress's commitment to Israel is sacrosanct.
America is about power, first and foremost. And who has the power makes the decisions. And money is power. No offense to anywhere else. So it's not Israel. And even if you support the state of Israel, that's your right, that's fine. But we need people to govern for here.
Down through the ages, the Jewish people have suffered persecution, oppression, not with Donald J. Trump.
I love you. AIPAC has one agenda. Their agenda is making sure that Israel continues to be supported by US dollars.
That's the making of Israel. And remember, too, that we will need material support in the military field.
Fine, that's your agenda. But we have people here, people who are Irish, Italian, Latino, West Indian, Asian, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, etc., who want our tax dollars to come here to support our child care, our health care, and all of the issues.
And I make this promise to you, my administration will always stand with Israel.
That they're doing it in the interests of all Jews. No, they're doing it in the interests of Zionism, U.S. imperialism, and overall injustice.
They are weaponizing this in order to crush any level of dissent or disagreement with what this administration is trying to do.
It's freedom of speech, yes, but if you have more money, you have more freedom.
And that's just a way of silencing, smearing and silencing the movement for justice.
Occupation has got to go!
Ironically, if the goal of all of this was to prop up support for the state of Israel, that support continues to collapse.
The most powerful lobby in this country by far was Israel and Jewish people. Today, it's almost like, what happened?
Israel, you can't hide! Israel, you can't hide! You're committing genocide! How many kids did you kill today? Israel, blood! USA! You can't hide!
should do your job in the Foreign Office or the State Department. But if your job is to basically provide political cover for war crimes, massacres, genocide, ethnic cleansing, a Holocaust, well, you should walk out. You should speak. You should have a conscience. Your career is not that important. I'm not. None of us are. Your morals, your soul, your heart, that is important. What you stand for in this world is important.
No tyrants, no kings!
If you think that career is going to sustain you while you watch over the Holocaust of an entire people, you have no soul. Your existence is relevant too. I've never not had moral clarity about what I stand for. Have I taken longer to make decisions sometimes? Yes. I have left roles, principally that would have made me a career diplomat. I'd lose my humanity if I continue. How could I walk away from the things I've seen and just get on with life? I don't understand people who haven't stopped the world today to prevent this genocide.
It's always going to be controversial. And so it has been in kind of conflict with power since the very beginning, with powerful people not wanting to be criticized, not wanting to be criticized at scale, and trying different ways to cut that off. And so that's ongoing. It's still there. And people need to understand that it's still there because they have to defend it.
We want justice, you say how?
Whatever you have left, you always have to be defending it and expanding it. Doesn't mean that what you say is necessarily going to get a hearing, or it's not going to be suppressed by powerful actors, but it does mean that at least you have a fighting chance at the beginning.
That's just the way America is. It's always been about wealth and it's always been about power. And people like myself and others, we continue to fight, and we will always fight for the people least lost and left behind. I worry about the country at present for everyone and the future of the country for my children. I don't want to be in a country where they don't have all of their human rights as people.
We have the power if we exercise the power. And nobody has that power more among all those people in this country than workers who, by their very presence at the workplace and in their unions, have tremendous untapped power to win justice for themselves, for ourselves, and all the way from here to Palestine and back.
I think we're so quick to let our rights slip out from under us. That's the biggest threat, really. It's us. We're the biggest power, but we're also the biggest threat to ourselves, collectively. After being fired for essentially being a Palestinian American, I filed a case against NYU for discrimination and for the violation of my constitutional right of free speech. And it's been a long process, but it's underway now. Hopefully, this will be the turn of the tides as well, by the way.
And when I reflect back on my life journey, it was such a lesson about the power of the pen and the power of free speech and what one person can do when they're allowed to exercise that right to change institutions and systems to bring about justice for everyone.
True freedom is when oppression doesn't exist anywhere. And by ignoring Palestine, you've shown that Western governments that they can get away with anything too, and they'll just deploy those same tactics and tools domestically. It's called the boomerang effect. What they do abroad always comes home. So the public in the US needs to rise up and take control, because that's the only way they're gonna actually obtain freedom, because they're not actually free.
And we just need to come together. I wish we could. I really, I want that more than anything. I just need my coworkers who didn't say a word, and it wasn't about me, but didn't say a word. If they had all banded together and spoken up, they could have at least saved my job. Not that I want it at this point, but they don't even understand the power that they have. People have so much power, and I wish more people understood that and utilized it.
Are you for the rights of people in this country to live in peace and prosperity?
You say how?
I see hope among the students. I am so proud of the students that have been protesting, and even now, going on 2 years, continue to protest under such difficult conditions.
So many people in this country and around the world are realizing that what is happening right now and what the American government is doing to support Israel and further this killing and mass murder and bloodshed is actually threatening our humanity as a whole. I believe actually also in the justice system, that justice will prevail, because I deeply believe in the values and the principles of this country, even though it did not deliver its values and principles to everyone.
And it does give me so much hope to see these young people who are exercising their free speech rights and are willing to put a lot on the line in exercising that right and defending the rights of the most vulnerable in our world. And right now, I would argue that those are the children of Gaza. And it's why I've been to a number of campuses and have stood in solidarity with them and have offered them any help and resources that I can as they continue to fight that fight.
The way these institutions are behaving punitively towards people who are utilizing their First Amendment constitutional rights, the script should be flipped.
All tyrannies are vulnerable. They present themselves as being invulnerable, but it's kind of like the emperor has no clothes and nobody will tell him. Because in fact, if we refuse to be silenced, then they cannot succeed. And we as Americans are going to stand up and say so.
So this is consistent, right? So they'll continue to crack down. The thing is, all the crackdowns do, and as history has shown us, anywhere in the world, when you keep cracking down on people, they keep rising up. The movement gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and the more violent the crackdown. You're looking for your own uprising at this point. You shouldn't be worried about an intifada in Palestine. You should be worried about an uprising from everyone in the United States.
I had time to reflect actually on this, and I continued to stay centered and to believe that the people in America who care deeply about those fundamental rights will rise. And the people in Vermont, as we saw, they did rise. And the judge in Vermont, Judge Crawford, he made a decision in favor of justice by basically letting me out and freeing me from a prison, even though the government has objected to it and they tried every nasty tactic to go after me. He was able to see through it and to know, as he have stated, the attack is very obvious to be an attack on a free speech, that what led to my detention in this country.
They will probably just keep doing it harder and harder, but I think that they don't understand that there's actually a connection between the two things, that Americans and people in the United States don't like to be told who they're allowed to criticize and who they're not allowed to criticize. And I think you've got a lot of people who are criticizing Israel today who might not be if they weren't told that they can't.
And there will be a time when this regime is pulled down and the attacks on free speech are pushed back, and we fight to win justice in this world with free speech for all.
And it is a really powerful and critical moment in our nation's history. And anyone who considers themselves a patriot and a defender of the ideals of the United States of America must, in this moment, stand up and speak out against a regime that is on the daily trying to strip away those rights that are guaranteed to us by our Creator and are guaranteed to us by the protections of the Constitution of the Republic of the United States of America.
You know I was always the one, couldn't stand idly by to watch while the bullies beat up on the other ones. I had to do something to try. How my government makes me complicit with the mere political aid that they send.